Patience isn't just waiting, it's having the strength to push forward when the world demands instant results. Master this, and you become unstoppable. Power in patience. How delayed gratification will make you unstoppable. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe if you enjoy the books I publish here. Comment where you're listening from. And the time there, it's always cool to see. Now, listen, grow, and hopefully you fall asleep. Chapter 1. The unexpected reunion that changed everything. Picture this. You're standing in a hotel lobby in Barcelona, Spain, wearing your college sweatshirt, about to embark on a Mediterranean cruise. The woman behind you in line notices your university logo and strikes up a conversation. Within minutes, you discover her husband is someone you haven't seen in 4 decades. Your best friend from 7th grade, now standing before you in a foreign country, thousands of miles from where your friendship began. This wasn't just coincidence. This was the result of choices I made decades earlier, choices that seemed painful at the time, but ultimately led to a life I could never have imagined as a struggling teenager in Indiana. But here's what most people don't understand about delayed gratification. It's not just about waiting for good things to happen, it's about fundamentally rewiring your brain to see opportunity where others see only sacrifice. Growing up as an immigrant child in America, I learned this lesson the hard way. My parents and I fled communist Cuba when I was 3 years old, escaping a life of uncertainty in search of something better. My father worked 2 full-time jobs while my mother attended college 3 hours away, struggling to master a foreign language. I was sent 1,000 miles away to live with my grandparents while my parents rebuilt their lives from scratch. We had no car. I walked to school daily through the harsh winters of northwest Missouri. Some classmates mocked our family for being different, for having accents, for not fitting their narrow definition of normal. While my friends received cars for their 16th birthdays and enjoyed expensive summer vacations, I watched from the sidelines, feeling cheated, envious, and sometimes bitter. The breaking point came during my freshman year of high school. I desperately wanted to play hockey for our school team. The sport represented everything I craved: belonging, recognition, the chance to prove myself. But my parents simply couldn't afford the expensive equipment. That rejection stung deeper than any winter wind I'd endured walking to school. Here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress when facing such disappointments. They allow temporary setbacks to define their permanent identity. They conclude that because they can't have what they want right now, they'll never have what they truly desire. I made a different choice. Instead of dwelling on what I couldn't have, I began focusing intensely on what I could control: my education, my work ethic, my long-term vision. This wasn't easy. Every day I watched classmates enjoy immediate pleasures while I buried myself in textbooks and homework. But the real secret isn't what you think. Delayed gratification isn't about denying yourself pleasure. It's about understanding the compound effect of strategic patience. Every hour I spent studying instead of socializing was an investment in a future version of myself that could afford not just hockey equipment, but opportunities my teenage self couldn't even imagine. During college, I survived on student loans and a few scholarships. While classmates spent money on fancy meals and entertainment, I chose to live frugally, eating in the dorms and limiting my social expenses. This wasn't deprivation, it was strategic resource allocation. I was playing a longer game than most people around me understood. The transformation began during my ophthalmology residency. Within a few short years of working, I could suddenly afford to travel the world and buy luxury items. More importantly, I could provide financial support to my parents who had sacrificed everything for my future. That moment in the Barcelona hotel lobby, reconnecting with my childhood friend, represented the culmination of decades of delayed gratification, paying compound interest. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The Stanford marshmallow experiment, conducted by psychologist Walter Mischel in the early 1970s, provides scientific validation for what I experienced firsthand. Children aged 4 through 6 were presented with a simple choice: eat 1 marshmallow immediately, or wait 15 minutes and receive 2 marshmallows. The children who successfully delayed gratification didn't just get an extra treat. Follow-up studies revealed they performed better academically, achieved higher SAT scores, and exhibited superior social and emotional skills throughout adolescence and into adulthood. The ability to delay gratification predicted success across virtually every meaningful life metric. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about how we approach delayed gratification. It's not about willpower alone. It's about developing what I call strategic patience, a systematic approach to building the life you truly want, rather than settling for what's immediately available. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves three fundamental shifts in thinking. First, you must clearly define your most important long-term goal, not just vague wishes, but specific, measurable outcomes. Second, you create a structured plan that breaks your vision into manageable steps with realistic timelines. Third, you practice mindful decision-making, pausing before every choice to consider whether it moves you toward or away from your ultimate objective. This framework transformed my life from one of scarcity and limitation to abundance and possibility. The same principles that helped me overcome childhood poverty and achieve professional success can work for anyone willing to embrace the power of strategic patience. But the most powerful technique is still coming. In the next chapter, we'll explore the neuroscience behind delayed gratification and discover how to literally rewire your brain for long-term success. Chapter 2. The neuroscience of strategic patience. The human brain is wired for immediate survival, not long-term prosperity. This fundamental mismatch between our ancient neural programming and modern success requirements explains why delayed gratification feels so difficult and why mastering it provides such a tremendous competitive advantage. Recent neuroscience research reveals that when we face the choice between immediate and delayed rewards, two distinct brain systems engage in what researchers call neural competition. The limbic system, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex and medial orbitofrontal cortex, activates when we consider immediate rewards. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and long-term planning, engages when we contemplate future benefits. Here's what most people don't understand about this neural battle. The limbic system operates approximately 20,000 times faster than the prefrontal cortex. This means your brain's immediate gratification system has a massive head start in every decision-making moment. Without conscious intervention, you're neurologically programmed to choose short-term pleasure over long-term gain. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything. You can literally rewire your brain through deliberate practice, strengthening the neural pathways associated with delayed gratification, while weakening the circuits that drive impulsive behavior. This process, called neuroplasticity, means your capacity for strategic patience isn't fixed, it's trainable. Consider the case of a 28-year-old software engineer who struggled with financial discipline. Despite earning a substantial salary, she found herself living paycheck to paycheck, unable to save for her dream of starting her own technology company. Every month, she promised herself she'd start saving, but unexpected expenses and impulse purchases consistently derailed her plans. The breakthrough came when she began implementing what neuroscientists call cognitive reappraisal. Instead of viewing saving money as deprivation, she reframed each dollar saved as a vote for her future entrepreneurial self. She created visual reminders of her long-term goal, including a detailed business plan and financial projections for her startup. Within 18 months, she had accumulated enough savings to quit her job and launch her company. 2 years later, her startup was acquired for 8 figures. The same neural pathways that once drove impulsive spending had been redirected towards strategic accumulation. The real secret isn't what you think, though. Successful delayed gratification isn't about suppressing desires. It's about redirecting them toward more compelling future outcomes. When your long-term vision becomes emotionally vivid and personally meaningful, your brain begins to experience anticipation of future rewards as more pleasurable than immediate gratification. This principle explains why some people effortlessly maintain healthy habits, while others struggle with basic self-control. Those who succeed have learned to make their future selves feel real and immediate. they've developed what psychologists call episodic future thinking, the ability to mentally time travel and experience future scenarios as if they were happening now. A 45-year-old marketing executive discovered this principle while attempting to lose weight after years of failed diet attempts. Instead of focusing on food restrictions, she began visualizing herself hiking mountains with her grandchildren, feeling energetic and confident in her body. She created detailed mental movies of these future experiences, engaging all her senses to make them feel real and immediate. The transformation was remarkable. Foods that once seemed irresistible lost their appeal when compared to the vivid future she was creating. Exercise became enjoyable because each workout brought her closer to the active lifestyle she envisioned. Within 2 years, she had lost 60 pounds and completed her first marathon. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The most successful practitioners of delayed gratification don't rely on willpower alone. They engineer their environment to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. This approach, called choice architecture, leverages the brain's tendency toward mental shortcuts rather than fighting against it. A financial advisor who wanted to increase his retirement savings automated transfers to occur immediately after each paycheck deposit. By removing the decision from his daily consciousness, he eliminated the opportunity for his limbic system to interfere with his long-term planning. Within 5 years, his automated system had accumulated more wealth than his previous decade of sporadic, willpower-based saving attempts. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding what researchers call temporal discounting. This refers to the brain's tendency to value immediate rewards more highly than future rewards, even when the future rewards are objectively more valuable. The key insight is that this discounting rate isn't fixed. It can be modified through specific mental techniques. One powerful method involves temporal reframing. Instead of thinking about a goal as something that will happen in the distant future, you learn to experience the journey toward that goal as immediately rewarding. An aspiring novelist who struggled to maintain a daily writing habit transformed her approach by focusing on the immediate satisfaction of crafting beautiful sentences rather than the distant goal of publication. But there's one crucial element that most people miss. The most effective delayed gratification strategies involve what psychologists call implementation intentions. These are specific if-then plans that automate good decisions before temptation arises. Instead of relying on in-the-moment willpower, you pre-decide how you'll respond to predictable challenges. For example, if I feel the urge to check social media during work hours, then I will immediately open my project management software and review my daily goals. This type of pre-commitment leverages the brain's pattern recognition systems to create automatic responses that support long-term objectives. The final piece that ties it all together involves understanding the role of identity in delayed gratification. When you begin to see yourself as someone who naturally makes long-term decisions, your behavior automatically aligns with this self-concept. You stop relying on motivation and start operating from a place of identity-based consistency. But the most powerful technique is still coming. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to create an environment that makes delayed gratification feel effortless and automatic. Chapter 3. Engineering your environment for success. The most successful people don't have more willpower than everyone else. They've simply designed their environment to make good decisions inevitable and bad decisions nearly impossible. This principle, known as environmental design, represents the difference between struggling against your impulses and having your surroundings automatically guide you toward your goals. Consider the story of a 32-year-old teacher who wanted to write a novel, but consistently found herself distracted by television, social media, and household chores. For months, she relied on willpower alone, promising herself she'd write for an hour each evening after work. The results were predictably disappointing. Most nights, she'd collapse on the couch, exhausted from her day, and convince herself she'd start tomorrow. The transformation began when she stopped trying to change her behavior and started changing her environment instead. She converted a corner of her bedroom into a dedicated writing space, complete with a comfortable chair, good lighting, and all her writing materials. More importantly, she removed all distractions from this space. no television, no smartphone, no internet connection. But here's what most people don't understand about environmental design. It's not just about removing temptations. It's about creating positive cues that automatically trigger the behaviors you want to develop. This teacher placed her laptop open on her writing desk each morning before leaving for work. When she returned home, the sight of her prepared workspace immediately reminded her of her commitment and made starting feel effortless. Within 6 months, she had completed her first novel. The same person who previously struggled to write a single paragraph was now producing 1,000 words daily with minimal effort. The difference wasn't increased motivation. It was strategic environmental engineering. The real secret isn't what you think, though. Most people focus on removing negative influences from their environment, while ignoring the power of adding positive triggers. Research in behavioral psychology shows that environmental cues can be more powerful than conscious intention in determining behavior. A 29-year-old financial analyst who wanted to exercise regularly discovered this principle after years of failed gym memberships. Instead of relying on motivation to get to the gym, he began sleeping in his workout clothes and placing his running shoes beside his bed. When his alarm rang each morning, he was already dressed for exercise, and his shoes served as an immediate visual reminder of his intention. The psychological barrier to starting his workout routine virtually disappeared. Within 3 months, he was exercising 6 days per week and had completed his first half marathon. The environmental cues had transformed exercise from a daily decision requiring willpower into an automatic response to his morning routine. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The most effective environmental design strategies work by reducing what psychologists call decision fatigue. Every choice you make throughout the day depletes your mental energy, making it harder to resist temptation later. By automating good decisions through environmental design, you preserve your willpower for situations where it's truly needed. A successful entrepreneur who built a multi-million-dollar consulting business applied this principle to her daily routine. She prepared identical healthy meals for the entire week every Sunday, eliminating daily food decisions. She laid out her clothes the night before, removing morning wardrobe choices. She scheduled her most important work during the same hours each day, creating automatic focus periods. These seemingly small environmental modifications freed enormous mental energy for creative problem solving and strategic thinking. Her business grew 300% in 2 years, not because she worked longer hours, but because she worked with greater focus and clarity. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about environmental design. The most powerful modifications work by making your desired behavior the path of least resistance. Instead of fighting against human nature, you align your environment with your brain's natural tendency to choose easy options. A 38-year-old marketing manager who wanted to read more books discovered this principle after struggling to maintain a reading habit for years. Instead of forcing herself to read for specific time periods, she began placing books in strategic locations throughout her home. A book on her nightstand for bedtime reading, another in her kitchen for breakfast reading, and a third in her living room for weekend relaxation. The key insight was removing friction from the reading process while adding friction to less productive activities. She moved her television remote to a drawer across the room and cancelled her streaming subscriptions. Reading became easier than watching television, and her natural tendency toward convenience automatically guided her toward her desired behavior. Within a year, she had read 52 books and developed expertise in her field that led to a significant promotion. The environmental changes had transformed her from someone who didn't have time to read into someone who naturally chose books over other entertainment options. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves what researchers call choice architecture. This means structuring your environment so that good choices are obvious, easy, and attractive, while poor choices are hidden, difficult, or unappealing. A software developer who wanted to improve his diet applied this principle by reorganizing his kitchen. Healthy foods were placed at eye level in clear containers, while processed snacks were stored in opaque containers in hard-to-reach locations. He prepared cut vegetables and fruits immediately after grocery shopping, making healthy options more convenient than processed alternatives. the results were dramatic. Without consciously trying to eat better, his diet improved significantly simply because healthy choices had become more accessible than unhealthy ones. He lost 25 pounds in 6 months without feeling deprived or relying on willpower. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate environmental design strategy involves creating what psychologists call commitment devices, external constraints that make it difficult or impossible to abandon your long-term goals when faced with short-term temptations. An aspiring musician who struggled to practice regularly created a commitment device by scheduling weekly lessons with an expensive instructor. The financial investment and social accountability made skipping practice sessions costly and embarrassing. Within a year, he had developed professional-level skills and began performing at local venues. The final piece that ties it all together involves understanding that your environment includes not just physical spaces, but also social influences, digital interfaces, and temporal structures. The most successful people engineer all these elements to support their long-term objectives. But there's one crucial element that most people miss, and it's the foundation for everything we'll explore in the next chapter. The power of social environment and how the people around you can either accelerate or sabotage your delayed gratification efforts. Chapter 4. The Social Architecture of Success. Your ability to delay gratification isn't just determined by your individual willpower or environmental design. It's profoundly influenced by the social networks you inhabit, the conversations you engage in, and the behavioral norms of the communities you choose to join. Understanding this social dimension of delayed gratification can multiply your success exponentially. Consider the remarkable story of a 26-year-old restaurant server who dreamed of becoming a chef but felt trapped in her current situation. She worked long hours for modest pay, and every month seemed to bring new financial emergencies that prevented her from saving for culinary school. Her friends and family, while well-meaning, consistently reinforced her limiting beliefs about her circumstances. Culinary school is too expensive, they'd say. You should be grateful for steady work. Why take such a big risk when you have bills to pay? These social messages, repeated constantly, created a psychological environment where delayed gratification felt impossible rather than strategic. The breakthrough came when she began deliberately seeking out different social influences. She started following successful chefs on social media, reading their stories of sacrifice and eventual triumph. She joined online communities of culinary students and professionals, surrounding herself with people who viewed culinary education as an investment rather than an expense. But here's what most people don't understand about social influence on delayed gratification. The people around you don't just affect your motivation. They literally reshape your perception of what's possible and what's normal. When everyone in your social circle lives paycheck to paycheck, saving money feels abnormal and difficult. When everyone around you prioritizes immediate pleasures, long-term planning seems unnecessary or even foolish. This server began attending free culinary events and workshops, gradually building relationships with people who had successfully made the transition from service work to professional cooking. She volunteered at charity cooking events, where she met established chefs who shared their stories of financial sacrifice and delayed gratification. The transformation in her thinking was remarkable. Surrounded by people who had successfully navigated the path she wanted to follow, saving for culinary school began to feel not just possible, but inevitable. Within 18 months, she had saved enough money to enroll in a prestigious culinary program. 2 years later, she was working as a sous chef at a high-end restaurant. The real secret isn't what you think, though. The most powerful social influences on delayed gratification aren't necessarily the people closest to you. They're the people whose future you want to inhabit. By strategically exposing yourself to individuals who have already achieved what you're working toward, you begin to internalize their mindset and behavioral patterns. A 35-year-old accountant who wanted to start his own practice discovered this principle while struggling to save the capital needed for his business launch. His current social circle consisted primarily of other employees who viewed entrepreneurship as risky and unrealistic. Their constant warnings about business failure and financial instability made it difficult for him to maintain confidence in his long-term plan. He began attending entrepreneurship meetups and small business networking events, gradually building relationships with successful business owners. These new connections didn't just provide practical advice. They normalized the concept of business ownership and made his goals feel achievable rather than fantastical. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Research in social psychology reveals that behavioral norms spread through social networks like viruses. When you observe others successfully practicing delayed gratification, your brain automatically begins to model their strategies and adopt their mindset. This process, called social learning, can accelerate your progress dramatically. The accountant noticed that his new entrepreneurial friends had different relationships with money, risk, and time. They viewed business investments as normal rather than scary, and they naturally thought in terms of long-term returns rather than immediate expenses. By spending time in this environment, he began to internalize these perspectives without conscious effort. Within 2 years, he had launched his own accounting practice and was earning more than his previous salary while working fewer hours. The social environment had provided not just encouragement, but also practical strategies and a completely different framework for thinking about financial decisions. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about leveraging social influence for delayed gratification. The most effective approach involves what researchers call strategic social exposure. This means deliberately seeking out people who embody the future version of yourself you're working to become. A 31-year-old nurse who wanted to become a nurse practitioner faced significant financial and time challenges. The advanced degree would require 2 years of full-time study while managing existing student loans and living expenses. Her current colleagues, while supportive, couldn't provide guidance about navigating this transition because none had made it themselves. She began reaching out to nurse practitioners in her area, requesting informational interviews about their career paths. These conversations revealed practical strategies for managing finances during graduate school, including scholarship opportunities, part-time work options, and budgeting techniques she hadn't considered. More importantly, these interactions provided social proof that her goal was achievable. Every conversation with a successful nurse practitioner reinforced the belief that she could navigate the challenges ahead. The delayed gratification required for graduate school began to feel like a normal part of professional development rather than an overwhelming sacrifice. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves creating what psychologists call accountability partnerships with people who share similar long-term goals. These relationships provide both support during difficult moments and gentle pressure to maintain consistency with your commitments. A software engineer who wanted to transition into data science formed a study group with 3 other professionals making similar career changes. They met weekly to review coursework, share job search strategies, and discuss their progress towards certification goals. The group dynamic made it difficult for any individual to abandon their studies when motivation waned. Within 18 months, all 4 group members had successfully transitioned into data science roles with significant salary increases. The social accountability had sustained their delayed gratification efforts through periods when individual willpower might have failed, but the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate social strategy involves what researchers call identity-based community membership. This means joining groups where your desired behavior is not just encouraged, but expected as part of group identity. A 29-year-old teacher who wanted to become financially independent joined an online community focused on early retirement through aggressive saving and investing. The group's culture normalized saving rates of 50% or more of income, making her own financial goals feel conservative rather than extreme. The social pressure to maintain high savings rates was positive rather than judgmental. Group members celebrated each other's milestones and provided support during challenging periods. The delayed gratification required for financial independence became a source of community pride rather than individual struggle. The final piece that ties it all together involves understanding that social influence works both ways. As you develop stronger delayed gratification skills, you begin to positively influence others in your network, creating a virtuous cycle of mutual support and accountability. But there's one crucial element that most people miss, and it forms the foundation for everything we'll explore in the next chapter. How to maintain motivation and momentum when delayed gratification feels most difficult. Chapter 5. Navigating the Valley of Despair. Every journey toward long-term success includes what I call the Valley of Despair, a psychological low point where the initial excitement has faded, progress feels invisible, and the temptation to abandon your goals reaches its peak. Understanding this inevitable phase and developing strategies to navigate it successfully separates those who achieve their dreams from those who give up just before breakthrough. The Valley of Despair typically occurs between months 3 and 18 of any significant delayed gratification effort. This is when the novelty of your new approach has worn off, but the benefits haven't yet become obvious. It's the period when the aspiring entrepreneur questions whether their business idea will ever generate profit, when someone learning a new skill wonders if they'll ever achieve competence, when a person saving for a major goal begins to doubt whether their sacrifice is worthwhile. Consider the experience of a 33-year-old graphic designer who decided to transition into user experience design. The career change required learning new software, understanding psychology principles, and building a portfolio while maintaining her current job to pay bills. The first few months felt exciting and full of possibility. She eagerly consumed online courses and practiced new techniques during evenings and weekends. But around month 6, the initial enthusiasm began to fade. Progress felt slow and incremental. Job applications in UX design received no responses. Meanwhile, she watched colleagues in her current field receive promotions and salary increases that she was forgoing in pursuit of her long-term goal. The immediate rewards of abandoning her transition plan and focusing on her existing career became increasingly attractive. Here's what most people don't understand about the Valley of Despair. It's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's a predictable psychological phase that occurs during any significant change process. The key insight is that this valley exists precisely because meaningful transformation takes time, and our brains are wired to seek immediate feedback and rewards. The breakthrough for this designer came when she reframed her experience from "I'm not making progress" to "I'm in the normal, expected phase of skill development." She began tracking small daily improvements rather than focusing only on major milestones. She celebrated completing each course module, finishing each portfolio project, and receiving each piece of feedback, no matter how minor. The real secret isn't what you think, though. The most successful people don't avoid the Valley of Despair, they prepare for it in advance. They understand that motivation naturally fluctuates, and they build systems that function independently of their emotional state. This designer created what she called her Valley Survival Kit, a collection of strategies specifically designed for moments when motivation disappeared. The kit included a list of her original reasons for pursuing UX design, testimonials from people who had successfully made similar transitions, and a detailed plan for what to do during low motivation periods. When the inevitable valley arrived, she didn't rely on willpower or inspiration. She simply followed her predetermined plan, continuing her studies and portfolio development even when it felt pointless. This systematic approach carried her through the difficult period until momentum naturally returned. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Research in behavioral psychology reveals that the Valley of Despair serves an important evolutionary function. It's your brain's way of testing whether your new direction is truly important to you or just a temporary whim. Those who persist through this testing phase develop genuine commitment and resilience that serves them throughout their journey. A 27-year-old sales representative who wanted to become a real estate investor experienced this testing phase during his second year of property acquisition. He had successfully purchased and renovated his first investment property, but the second deal fell through due to financing issues. The third property required more repairs than anticipated, eating into his projected profits. During this valley period, he questioned whether real estate investing was worth the stress and uncertainty. His friends suggested he should stick to his stable sales job rather than pursuing risky investments. The temptation to abandon his long-term wealth-building strategy and return to the comfort of a steady paycheck became overwhelming. The turning point came when he recognized these doubts as a normal part of the learning process, rather than evidence that he should quit. He had prepared for this phase by studying the experiences of successful investors, many of whom described similar periods of uncertainty and setback during their early years. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about navigating the valley of despair. The most effective strategy involves what psychologists call process focus rather than outcome focus. Instead of measuring success only by final results, you learn to find satisfaction in the daily actions that lead toward your goals. This investor began celebrating small victories, completing property analysis spreadsheets, networking with other investors, learning new renovation techniques. These process-based rewards provided immediate gratification while maintaining momentum toward his long-term objectives. The delayed gratification became less painful because he was receiving regular positive feedback from his daily efforts. Within 5 years, he had built a portfolio of 12 rental properties, generating enough passive income to replace his sales salary. The valley of despair that nearly derailed his progress had actually strengthened his commitment and taught him valuable persistence skills that accelerated his later success. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves creating what researchers call implementation intentions specifically for valley periods. These are predetermined responses to predictable challenges, removing the need for decision-making when motivation is low. A 30-year-old teacher who was working toward a master's degree in educational leadership created specific plans for different types of valley experiences. If she felt overwhelmed by coursework, she would break assignments into smaller tasks and complete just one small piece. If she questioned the value of the degree, she would review her career goals and read success stories of other educational leaders. If she felt too tired to study, she would commit to just 10 minutes of reading, often finding that starting led to longer study sessions. These predetermined responses eliminated the mental energy required to make decisions during difficult moments. Instead of debating whether to continue or quit, she simply followed her established protocols until motivation naturally returned. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate valley navigation strategy involves understanding that the valley of despair is actually where the most important growth occurs. It's during these challenging periods that you develop the character traits and mental resilience that will serve you throughout your life. A 34-year-old marketing manager who was building a side business experienced her deepest valley during month 8 of her entrepreneurial journey. Revenue was minimal. She was exhausted from working 2 jobs, and her social life had suffered from her intense focus on business development. Every rational analysis suggested she should abandon the venture and return to a normal work-life balance. Instead of viewing this period as evidence of failure, she recognized it as the crucible where her entrepreneurial identity was being forged. She understood that pushing through this valley would develop capabilities and confidence that would benefit her for decades to come. The final piece that ties it all together involves recognizing that the valley of despair is temporary, but the growth you experience while navigating it is permanent. Every time you choose long-term goals over immediate comfort during these challenging periods, you strengthen your capacity for delayed gratification and build confidence in your ability to achieve difficult objectives. But there's one crucial element that most people miss, and it's the key to everything we'll explore in the next chapter. How to accelerate your progress and shorten the time between effort and reward. Chapter 6. The acceleration principle. While delayed gratification requires patience, it doesn't require inefficiency. The most successful practitioners of strategic patience understand how to compress timelines, multiply their efforts, and create momentum that makes waiting feel less like sacrifice and more like strategic positioning. This acceleration principle can dramatically reduce the time between your initial investment and meaningful returns. The key insight is that delayed gratification isn't about waiting passively for good things to happen. It's about making strategic investments that compound over time, creating exponential rather than linear progress. Understanding this distinction transforms delayed gratification from a test of endurance into an exercise in strategic thinking. Consider the story of a 25-year-old administrative assistant who wanted to transition into digital marketing. Traditional advice would suggest she should slowly take evening classes while maintaining her current job, a path that might take 3 to 4 years to complete. Instead, she applied the acceleration principle to compress her timeline dramatically. Rather than spreading her learning over several years, she negotiated a temporary reduction in work hours and used her savings to enroll in an intensive digital marketing bootcamp. She simultaneously began offering free marketing services to local small businesses, gaining practical experience while building a portfolio. She documented her learning journey on social media, attracting the attention of marketing professionals who became mentors and eventually job references. But here's what most people don't understand about acceleration. It's not about working harder, it's about working more strategically. This assistant identified the minimum viable skills needed for entry-level marketing positions and focused intensively on developing those specific capabilities rather than pursuing comprehensive but unfocused education. Within 8 months, she had landed a digital marketing role with a 40% salary increase. The concentrated effort and strategic approach had compressed what typically takes years into less than a year, while actually requiring less total time investment than the traditional slow and steady approach. The real secret isn't what you think, though. Acceleration works by leveraging what economists call network effects and compound learning. Instead of developing skills in isolation, you create connections and experiences that multiply the value of your efforts. A 29-year-old accountant who wanted to become a financial advisor discovered this principle while building his client base. Rather than slowly accumulating clients one by one, he focused on developing relationships with other professionals who regularly encountered people needing financial advice: real estate agents, attorneys, and insurance brokers. By providing valuable financial education to these referral sources, he created a system where multiple professionals were actively promoting his services. Within 2 years, he had built a practice that typically takes 5 to 7 years to develop through traditional client acquisition methods. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The acceleration principle works by identifying and eliminating bottlenecks that slow progress toward your goals. Most people focus on working harder within existing constraints rather than questioning whether those constraints are necessary. A 32-year-old nurse who wanted to open her own wellness clinic faced the traditional path of saving money slowly while working full-time, then eventually securing a business loan for her venture. This approach would have required 5 to 7 years of preparation before she could launch her business. Instead, she applied acceleration thinking to identify alternative paths. She partnered with an established wellness center, providing services as an independent contractor while learning business operations. She gradually built her own client base within this environment, eventually negotiating to purchase a portion of the existing business rather than starting from scratch. This approach allowed her to become a business owner within 18 months while requiring significantly less capital and risk than the traditional startup path. The acceleration came from leveraging existing infrastructure rather than building everything independently. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about acceleration. The most effective strategies involve what business theorists call asymmetric risk, investments where the potential upside far exceeds the potential downside. This allows you to take calculated risks that can dramatically accelerate progress without jeopardizing your long-term security. A 28-year-old software developer who wanted to become a technology entrepreneur applied this principle while building his first startup. Rather than quitting his job immediately to focus on his business idea, he negotiated a remote work arrangement that allowed him to maintain his salary while dedicating mornings and evenings to his venture. He used his stable income to fund modest experiments and product development, testing his business concept without risking financial catastrophe. When his startup began generating revenue, he gradually reduced his employment hours, eventually transitioning to full-time entrepreneurship only after his business income exceeded his salary. This asymmetric approach allowed him to build a successful company while maintaining financial security throughout the process. The acceleration came from running both tracks simultaneously, rather than choosing between security and opportunity. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding what researchers call leverage points, specific actions that create disproportionate results. Instead of applying equal effort to all aspects of your goal, you identify the few activities that drive the majority of your progress. A 35-year-old teacher who wanted to become a published author discovered that the traditional advice to write every day was less effective than focusing intensively on understanding the publishing industry. She spent 3 months studying successful authors' career paths, learning about literary agents, and understanding market trends before writing a single chapter. This research phase allowed her to write a book proposal that immediately attracted agent interest, leading to a publishing contract before her manuscript was complete. The acceleration came from understanding the business side of publishing rather than focusing solely on writing craft. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate acceleration strategy involves creating what economists call positive feedback loops, systems where early success makes future success more likely and easier to achieve. A 26-year-old graphic designer who wanted to build a freelance business applied this principle by initially undercharging for her services to attract high-quality clients quickly. The excellent work she delivered at below-market rates generated enthusiastic testimonials and referrals, allowing her to raise her prices while maintaining steady demand. Within 18 months, she was earning more as a freelancer than she had as an employee, with a waiting list of potential clients. The initial sacrifice of charging lower rates had created a reputation and referral system that accelerated her business growth exponentially. The final piece that ties it all together involves recognizing that acceleration often requires temporary intensification of effort rather than permanent lifestyle changes. By concentrating your delayed gratification efforts into shorter, more intense periods, you can achieve breakthrough results while minimizing the total time spent in sacrifice mode. But there's one crucial element that most people miss, and it's the foundation for everything we'll explore in the final chapter. How to maintain your gains and continue growing once you've achieved your initial delayed gratification goals. Chapter 7. The compound effect of sustained success. Achieving your first major delayed gratification goal is just the beginning. The real power emerges when you understand how to leverage that initial success into a lifetime of accelerating achievement. This compound effect transforms delayed gratification from a temporary strategy into a permanent competitive advantage that grows stronger with each application. The fundamental principle is that each successful delayed gratification experience builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, your confidence in your ability to achieve difficult goals. This confidence becomes a psychological asset that makes future challenges feel more manageable and success more inevitable. Consider the journey of a 31-year-old retail manager who successfully saved for 2 years to attend business school. The MBA program itself was challenging, but the delayed gratification skills she had developed while saving made the academic sacrifices feel routine rather than overwhelming. She approached studying, networking, and internship applications with the same systematic patience that had enabled her initial savings goal. But here's what most people don't understand about the compound effect. Each delayed gratification success doesn't just build confidence, it literally rewires your brain's reward systems. You begin to derive genuine pleasure from the process of working toward long-term goals, making future delayed gratification efforts feel natural rather than forced. This business school graduate found that she actually enjoyed the strategic planning and systematic progress toward her career objectives. What had once felt like sacrifice now felt like engaging problem solving. She approached job searching, salary negotiations, and career development with the same methodical approach that had served her throughout her educational journey. Within 5 years of completing her MBA, she had been promoted to director level at a Fortune 500 company, with compensation that exceeded her pre-business school salary by 300%. The compound effect had transformed not just her financial situation, but her entire approach to professional development. The real secret isn't what you think, though. The most powerful compound effects occur when you begin to see delayed gratification as an identity rather than a strategy. Instead of someone who occasionally practices patience for specific goals, you become someone who naturally thinks in terms of long-term value creation. A 27-year-old software engineer experienced this identity shift after successfully transitioning from employee to freelance consultant. The delayed gratification required to build his independent practice had been challenging, but the process had fundamentally changed how he approached all decisions. He began evaluating every opportunity through the lens of long-term strategic value rather than immediate benefit. This shift in perspective led him to turn down high-paying short-term contracts in favor of relationships with clients who offered learning opportunities and potential for ongoing collaboration. He invested time in developing proprietary tools and methodologies that would differentiate his services in the marketplace. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The compound effect accelerates when you begin to apply delayed gratification principles to multiple areas of your life simultaneously. Instead of focusing on one goal at a time, you develop systems that create progress across health, relationships, finances, and career development concurrently. This consultant applied his systematic approach to physical fitness, gradually building an exercise routine that improved his energy and mental clarity. He invested time in developing deeper relationships with family and friends, understanding that strong personal connections would provide support during future challenges. He continued learning new technologies and business skills, maintaining his competitive edge in a rapidly evolving field. The synergistic effects were remarkable. Better physical health improved his work performance. Stronger relationships provided emotional support that made professional risks feel more manageable. Continuous learning created opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Each area of improvement reinforced and accelerated progress in other areas. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about sustaining compound effects. The most successful people understand that delayed gratification becomes easier over time, not harder. As you develop stronger systems and clearer identity around long-term thinking, the effort required to maintain good decisions actually decreases. A 33-year-old marketing director who had successfully built a real estate investment portfolio discovered this principle during her 5th year of property acquisition. The research, analysis, and patience required for her first few investments had felt challenging and time-consuming. By her 10th property, the same processes felt automatic and enjoyable. She had developed expertise that made good investment decisions obvious rather than difficult. Her network of real estate professionals provided deal flow that eliminated much of the searching and evaluation work. Her financial systems automatically allocated funds for future investments without requiring conscious budgeting decisions. The delayed gratification that had once required significant willpower now operated as a natural extension of her identity and expertise. She was no longer someone who practiced delayed gratification. She was someone who naturally created long-term value through strategic patience. The advanced strategy that separates success from failure involves understanding what researchers call virtuous cycles, where the benefits of delayed gratification create conditions that make future delayed gratification easier and more rewarding. A 29-year-old teacher who had successfully completed a master's degree while working full-time discovered that the discipline and time management skills developed during her studies made all subsequent goals feel more achievable. She applied the same systematic approach to learning new languages, developing side income streams, and maintaining physical fitness. Each success built momentum for the next challenge. The confidence gained from completing graduate school made starting a tutoring business feel manageable. The business skills developed through entrepreneurship made financial planning feel straightforward. The financial security created through multiple income streams made it possible to take calculated risks on new opportunities. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate compound effect strategy involves what I call legacy thinking, where your delayed gratification efforts begin to benefit not just yourself, but the people and causes you care about most deeply. A 36-year-old physician who had built significant wealth through consistent investing and delayed gratification began using her resources to fund scholarships for students from backgrounds similar to her own. The satisfaction of enabling others' success created a new dimension of meaning that made continued financial discipline feel purposeful rather than restrictive. She established a foundation that provided both financial support and mentorship for first-generation college students pursuing medical careers. The delayed gratification that had once been focused on personal goals now served a larger mission that felt infinitely more rewarding than individual achievement. The final piece that ties it all together involves recognizing that mastery of delayed gratification ultimately transcends personal benefit. It becomes a way of contributing to the world by modeling what's possible when someone commits to long-term thinking and strategic patience. When you consistently demonstrate that delayed gratification leads to meaningful success, you inspire others to adopt similar approaches. Your example becomes a form of leadership that extends far beyond your individual achievements. The compound effect reaches its ultimate expression when your success enables and encourages success in others. The journey that began with simple choices between immediate and delayed rewards evolves into a lifetime of creating value, building relationships, and contributing to something larger than yourself. This is the true power of patience. Not just the ability to wait for what you want, but the wisdom to build a life that makes waiting feel like the most natural and rewarding choice you could make. Remember, every moment of delayed gratification is an investment in the person you're becoming. Every choice to prioritize long-term value over immediate pleasure strengthens your capacity for future success. The compound effect ensures that these investments don't just pay dividends, they create exponential returns that transform not just your life, but the lives of everyone you touch along the way. Chapter 8: The Mastery Mindset. True mastery of delayed gratification transcends technique and strategy. It represents a fundamental shift in consciousness where patience becomes power, where waiting becomes wisdom, and where the journey toward your goals becomes as rewarding as the destination itself. This mastery mindset separates those who occasionally practice delayed gratification from those who embody it as a core life philosophy. The transformation from practitioner to master occurs when you stop viewing delayed gratification as something you do and start experiencing it as something you are. This shift typically happens after successfully navigating multiple long-term goals and witnessing firsthand how strategic patience creates opportunities that immediate gratification could never provide. Consider the evolution of a 39-year-old financial planner who had spent 15 years building her practice through consistent delayed gratification principles. Early in her career, choosing to reinvest profits rather than increase her lifestyle felt like sacrifice. She would watch peers purchase luxury cars and expensive homes while she continued driving her reliable sedan and living in a modest apartment. But here's what most people don't understand about the mastery mindset. It emerges when you begin to derive genuine satisfaction from the process of creating long-term value rather than just anticipating future rewards. This planner discovered that she actually enjoyed the strategic thinking, careful planning, and systematic progress more than the material outcomes they produced. By year 10 of her practice, she had developed what she called process pleasure, a deep appreciation for the daily activities that built her business and served her clients. Client meetings, financial analysis, and strategic planning sessions became sources of immediate gratification because she understood their role in creating lasting value. The real secret isn't what you think, though. Mastery doesn't eliminate the desire for immediate rewards. It transforms your understanding of what constitutes true reward. You begin to recognize that the most satisfying experiences come from activities that simultaneously serve your present enjoyment and future objectives. This financial planner found that helping clients achieve their long-term financial goals provided more satisfaction than any material purchase could offer. The delayed gratification she practiced in building her business had evolved into a career that delivered immediate fulfillment through meaningful work that created lasting impact. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The mastery mindset creates what psychologists call temporal integration, where the boundaries between present and future satisfaction begin to dissolve. You stop experiencing tension between what you want now and what you want eventually because your current activities align perfectly with your long-term vision. A 42-year-old surgeon who had spent decades developing his expertise experienced this integration during complex operations. The years of delayed gratification required for medical training, residency, and specialization had culminated in work that was simultaneously challenging, immediately engaging, and profoundly meaningful. He no longer thought about his career in terms of sacrifice and reward. Each surgery represented an opportunity to apply skills developed through years of patient study and practice. The delayed gratification that had once felt difficult now felt like the natural expression of his identity and purpose. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about achieving mastery. The most advanced practitioners understand that delayed gratification ultimately serves something larger than personal achievement. It becomes a vehicle for contribution, creativity, and positive impact that extends far beyond individual success. A 35-year-old architect who had built her reputation through meticulous attention to sustainable design principles discovered that her commitment to long-term environmental thinking had created opportunities to work on projects that could influence urban development for generations. The delayed gratification of choosing challenging, meaningful projects over immediately profitable ones had positioned her as a leader in her field. Her buildings would stand for decades, potentially centuries, serving communities long after she was gone. This perspective transformed every design decision from a career choice into a legacy choice. The mastery mindset had expanded her time horizon beyond her own lifetime. The advanced strategy that separates mastery from mere competence involves what researchers call transcendent motivation, where your delayed gratification efforts serve purposes that extend beyond personal benefit. This creates a sustainable source of motivation that doesn't depend on external rewards or recognition. A 44-year-old teacher who had spent 20 years developing innovative educational methods found that her commitment to student success had become completely independent of salary, recognition, or career advancement. She continued refining her teaching approaches because she understood their impact on young minds and future generations. The delayed gratification required to develop these methods, often working evenings and weekends without additional compensation, felt natural because it served her deepest values and sense of purpose. The mastery mindset had aligned her daily actions with her core identity as an educator. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate expression of mastery involves what I call effortless discipline, where delayed gratification becomes so integrated into your identity that it requires no conscious effort or willpower. Good decisions happen automatically because they represent the natural expression of who you've become. A 38-year-old entrepreneur who had built multiple successful businesses discovered that the financial discipline, strategic thinking, and long-term planning that had once required significant effort now operated as unconscious competencies. She naturally evaluated opportunities through long-term lenses, automatically allocated resources for future growth, and instinctively chose sustainable practices over quick profits. This effortless discipline extended beyond business into all areas of her life. Health decisions, relationship choices, and personal development activities all reflected the same underlying commitment to long-term value creation. The mastery mindset had become a comprehensive life philosophy rather than a business strategy. The final piece that ties it all together involves recognizing that mastery of delayed gratification creates what philosophers call temporal freedom. You become liberated from the tyranny of immediate circumstances because you understand how present actions create future possibilities. When you truly master delayed gratification, you gain the ability to remain calm during temporary setbacks, confident during uncertain periods, and focused during distracting moments. You understand that current conditions are temporary and that your consistent actions are creating the future you desire. But there's one crucial element that most people miss, and it forms the foundation for everything we'll explore in the final chapter: how to teach and share these principles with others, creating a legacy that extends far beyond your individual achievements. Chapter 9: Creating your legacy of patience. The ultimate expression of delayed gratification mastery isn't just personal success, it's the ability to inspire and enable others to develop their own capacity for strategic patience. When you become a living example of what's possible through delayed gratification, you create ripple effects that can transform families, communities, and even entire organizations. This legacy dimension represents the highest level of impact you can achieve. The journey from personal mastery to legacy creation begins when you recognize that your success story isn't just about you. Every goal you've achieved through delayed gratification, every challenge you've overcome through strategic patience, and every system you've developed for long-term thinking becomes a resource that can benefit others facing similar challenges. Consider the transformation of a 45-year-old executive who had built significant wealth through decades of consistent investing and lifestyle discipline. Initially, her focus was entirely personal, building financial security, achieving career goals, and creating the life she wanted for herself and her family. But as her success became visible to colleagues and friends, she began receiving requests for advice and mentorship. But here's what most people don't understand about creating a legacy of patience. It's not about preaching or lecturing others about delayed gratification. It's about modeling the principles so consistently and authentically that others naturally want to understand and adopt your approach. This executive discovered that her most powerful teaching moments came not from formal presentations, but from casual conversations, where she shared her decision-making process. When colleagues asked how she remained calm during market volatility, she explained her long-term investment philosophy. When friends wondered how she maintained work-life balance, she described her systematic approach to prioritizing activities that served multiple long-term objectives. The real secret isn't what you think, though. The most effective legacy builders understand that different people need different entry points into delayed gratification thinking. Some respond to financial examples, others to health and fitness stories, and still others to career development narratives. Master teachers learn to recognize what resonates with each individual and tailor their approach accordingly. A 41-year-old physician who had overcome significant educational and financial obstacles to build her practice became a mentor for medical students from similar backgrounds. She understood that her story of delayed gratification through medical school, residency, and practice development could provide both inspiration and practical guidance for others facing comparable challenges. Rather than offering generic advice, she shared specific strategies that had worked for her: how to maintain motivation during difficult rotations, how to manage student loan debt while building a practice, how to balance immediate financial pressures with long-term career development. Her legacy was built through detailed, practical wisdom rather than abstract principles. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The most powerful legacy creation occurs when you help others develop their own delayed gratification systems rather than simply copying yours. This requires understanding that each person's path will be unique, even though the underlying principles remain consistent. A 37-year-old business owner who had successfully transitioned from employee to entrepreneur began hosting monthly meetups for aspiring business owners. Instead of prescribing specific strategies, she facilitated discussions where participants could explore how delayed gratification principles might apply to their unique situations and goals. Some attendees were saving to start businesses, others were developing skills while maintaining employment, and still others were building side projects that might eventually become full-time ventures. Her role was to help each person identify their own version of strategic patience rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all approach. But there's one crucial principle that changes everything about legacy creation. The most sustainable impact comes from building systems and communities that can continue growing and helping people long after your direct involvement ends. This requires thinking beyond individual mentorship to institutional and cultural change. A 43-year-old educator who had transformed her school's approach to student goal setting developed a curriculum that taught delayed gratification principles as part of regular academic instruction. Students learned to set long-term academic goals, break them into manageable steps, and celebrate progress milestones along the way. The program became so successful that other schools began adopting similar approaches. Her legacy extended far beyond the students she taught directly to include thousands of young people who would learn these principles as part of their standard education. The delayed gratification mindset became embedded in institutional culture rather than dependent on individual teachers. The advanced strategy that separates temporary influence from lasting legacy involves what researchers call multiplicative impact, where the people you influence go on to influence others, creating exponential rather than linear effects. A 39-year-old financial advisor who had built her practice around delayed gratification principles began training other advisors in her approach. These advisors then worked with their own clients, who in turn influenced their families and social networks. The ripple effects extended far beyond her direct client relationships to impact entire communities' approach to financial planning and long-term thinking. She tracked these multiplicative effects and discovered that her influence had reached thousands of people through just a few degrees of separation. The legacy of patience was spreading organically through networks of relationships rather than requiring her constant personal involvement. But the most powerful technique is still coming. The ultimate legacy strategy involves what I call institutional embedding, where delayed gratification principles become integrated into the fundamental structures and cultures of organizations, communities, or even societies. A 46-year-old policy researcher who had spent her career studying long-term economic trends began working with government agencies to incorporate delayed gratification thinking into public policy development. Instead of focusing only on immediate political benefits, policymakers began considering the long-term consequences of their decisions and designing programs that would create sustainable value over decades. This institutional approach meant that delayed gratification principles would influence millions of people through improved policies, better resource allocation, and more sustainable approaches to social challenges. Her legacy operated at a scale that individual mentorship could never achieve. The final piece that ties it all together involves recognizing that your legacy of patience will ultimately be measured not by what you achieved personally, but by what you enabled others to achieve. The true test of mastery is whether the principles you've embodied continue creating value long after you're no longer actively promoting them. When you successfully create a legacy of patience, you contribute to a cultural shift toward long-term thinking that can address some of humanity's most pressing challenges. Climate change, economic inequality, educational disparities, and social conflicts all require the kind of strategic patience and delayed gratification thinking that you've mastered in your personal life. Your individual journey from immediate gratification to strategic patience becomes part of a larger movement toward wisdom, sustainability, and genuine progress. The patience you've developed, the systems you've created, and the examples you've set become resources that future generations can build upon. This is the ultimate power of delayed gratification, not just the ability to achieve your personal goals, but the capacity to contribute to a world where strategic thinking, long-term planning, and patient persistence become the norm rather than the exception. Your legacy of patience becomes a gift to the future, ensuring that the principles you've mastered continue creating value long after your individual story has ended. The journey that began with simple choices between immediate and delayed rewards culminates in the profound satisfaction of knowing that your life has contributed to making patience, wisdom, and long-term thinking more accessible and attractive to others. This is how individual mastery becomes collective transformation, and how personal delayed gratification becomes a force for positive change in the world.